I've already told everyone in the room that you have the gift of this book, but I just want to share this with anyone who's watching us online. This book is called I Am God in Disguise, So Are You, by Craig Kolovu. And Craig has given this to us as a gift, and if there's anyone who's watching us online that wants one of these, go to our website, push the donation button, and leave me a message that you'd like a book, and we'll make sure that you get one. It's a wonderful book. It's an easy read, and it's got some fascinating ways of looking at stuff. And as I was reading this book this week, I was thrown back into my early days of finding my way. And that began for me. There's a place in the book where he talks about when the battle of your bodyguard, which is more or less your ego, and your giant, which is more or less your greater sense of self, your spiritual beingness. Those two kind of hit a point where they collide, and that happened to me in Sydney, Australia, when I had run away from home, when my life was pretty much a mess. And where I had to change something, so I thought going to the other side of the planet would help me with that. The thing is that I was still there. But for the first time, my being introduced to something beyond my traditional values, Christian values that I had grown up with, started to take form. The teacher that found me, or that I crashed into on my third or fourth day in Sydney, really just resonated with me, and what he was saying suddenly made sense. I can remember in years before that, in my 20s and 30s, from time to time someone would give me a little book of wisdom, and it'd have all these wonderful sayings in it, and I'd read a little bit of it and go, I don't get it. And I would toss it aside. But obviously I had to crash and burn, lose my business and my marriage and so much else in my life to go to the other side of the planet. I mean, obviously I have some need for drama. But I had to go to the other side of the planet to actually break through this idea that my life was going to be a mess like that forever. I had found out that money didn't change my way of being in the world. It just gave me another excuse for messing up. So having a lot of money and a successful business really wasn't the answer. It was something greater than that. And so I went to the other side of the planet, and I began my work. And what I discovered, I don't remember exactly when it happened, but one of the little epiphanies that really hit me and made a big difference in my life was one day when I was under some kind of stress for something, not having done something or needing to finish something on a deadline or whatever it was. And I got this phrase, it sort of came to me, and it was so simple. It was, life is a game. And weirdly, that little phrase was my way out of anything. If something was screwy and I didn't know what to do, or someone decided that I was a bad person, or whatever it was, it didn't matter. I would go, oh yeah, life's a game. And that would pull me out of it. I wouldn't fall into the abyss like I had the earlier part of my life. And I could get through pretty much anything because life is a game. Now, that didn't resonate with a lot of people when I would share that with them. But then I found that there was someone who did resonate with that idea. Her name was Florence Scovel Shinn, and she wrote the book called The Game of Life and How to Play It. And she agreed with me in this statement. She wrote, most people consider life a battle, but it is not a battle, it is a game. Okay, what does that mean? It's a game. Well, it means, if you think about it, that it must relate to what everything with games relate to. There are two qualities or two aspects of any game that you play. As you saw there, the game of life is actually a board game. And it has rules. If you don't have rules in a game, how do you play it? How does everybody know what are the parameters of being in the game? And that's true of sports. It's true of any kind of games that go on. There's ways that it's done. And so to have a game, you got to have rules. And then you also have to have strategies. You have to have a strategy if you want to play a game. You can go into it. If you ever have played chess, someone who understands and has mastered the concept of chess has a different way of approaching it from someone who just sits down and knows how to move the pieces. I remember being able to move the pieces, and if you're able to move the pieces and you're playing against someone who understands the game and the strategies of the game, it only takes them 2 or 3 moves to beat you because you will do exactly what they want you to do. It's quite fascinating. So rules, in fact, let's go ahead there. Rules and strategies. Those are the things that we use to have a game. So if life is a game, then there must be rules and strategies. Now, I'm not going to tell you that I've figured out all the rules and strategies. In fact, there may be many, many, many. But I found some in me that I want to share with you today. And I think it's 5 rules and 3 strategies. And we're going to go through them and see what you think, okay? So the first rule for me of the game of life is everybody gets a body. I don't think I'm going to get much pushback on that. Although I have met people who say that multiple entities can control a body, and you've heard of multiple personalities and that kind of stuff. We're not doing that today. Let that go. But the idea is basically that each of us who's walking around with a body, there's a spiritual being that's running that body. Now, I happen to believe that the spiritual being isn't in the body. You know how they've tried to weigh people at the moment of death to see how they could find out how much a soul weighs? I think they're missing the point. I think it was the biologist. What's his name, the biologist? Lipton. Bruce Lipton. Amazing guy. Met him here in Asheville. Lipton is very clear that the spiritual being has no weight or size, that it doesn't exist in physical form, that we are the spiritual beings, we have a body that we resonate with through a frequency, and he explained it all so clearly and scientifically about how the body receives signals from although there's no place that this being is that we are, but it's not something solid or alive in the body. The body exists, and the being controls the body. Now, we could talk about that all day, and I'm not going to do that, but the truth is that we get a body. So what does that mean? Well, that means we're responsible for our body. That means that we've got it for as long as we're here, and that our job is to do the best we can maintaining that body, keeping it healthy, and that truly the size of our body, the shape of our body is an essential part of our spiritual understanding, although it's very good to take care of our bodies. It's good to be grateful for our bodies, and by being grateful for our bodies, we tend to take better care of them. Okay, enough said about that. Rule number 1, everybody gets a body. Rule number 2, we can live our lives any way we choose. That's absolutely true, but this is one that I'd get a lot of pushback from people about. No, I can't. I have to do this, or I can only do that, or I'm not good enough, or putting some kind of limitation on it. But the truth is that it's your choice what you do with this life. We're all eternal beings. We don't start at birth and end at death, but our body does. Our use of that body starts, and I'm not going to get into an argument about when that happens, whether it's at conception or at the first breath, I don't know. But I do know that we have this relationship with the body, and what we do with that body is absolutely up to us. We can abuse it. We can overuse it. We can underuse it. We can use it for a few days and then let it go. We could be in it for 120 years. It's our choice. We get to do that. We get to experience life through that body based on our choices. And our choices can be pretty extreme. We can do with it what we like, and it's really not up to other people to tell us how to do that. We can be rich. We can be poor. We can be angry. We can be happy. We can use this thing any way that we want. And truly, from a spiritual perspective, you can't do it wrong. I mean, I've heard amazing stories about children being born into a life where they, through relationships and connections when they're still infants, have made massive changes in other people's lives. And then they left. It's like they came in to do that. There was a book called Many Lives, Many Masters that came out, 30, 40 years ago. It was an amazing book written by a psychiatrist who was very clear from his research that we have multiple lives. But the most interesting story in that book for me was when one of the people that he had taken into this altered state came out of it at this higher level of presence and looked at him and said something to him about his choice to be a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist started to explain why that was. And this one that was speaking through this person said, no, I was your son who came. And he had actually had a son that lived just a few days. And this one's saying, I came in to direct you away from becoming a surgeon and direct you into becoming a psychiatrist, because that's why you came here. Ooh. And then the person snapped out of it and went into something very different. And that left me with such a sense that we actually have guides that could actually be in bodies. And that a life well lived doesn't have to live 80, 90, 100 years. A life well lived can be 3 days. It just depends. It just depends. So we get to choose how that life works. And nobody ever did it wrong. I'm absolutely clear about that. Everybody's doing it just fine. The third rule I want to share with you is this idea that whatever we put out is exactly what we get back. That is really the essence of the whole idea of being in metaphysics, is to understand that we are creating our experience, but we're not creating it out there. We're creating it, and I'm not saying inside of our bodies, we're creating it in mind. We're creating it through our thinking and through our words and through our actions, although it really is all about thinking, because our words come from our thinking and so do our actions. So what we're thinking is creating our lives, and it's not only creating it as an expression into life, which is essential and very important, but it's also creating it in how we receive information back as experiences. Because every one of our experiences has to filter through those beliefs, those things that we hold as thought and hold as reality. It's on both ends of this. So the experience you're having is as much affected by your belief system as your actions are affecting them. And actions are essential to this, but they actually all come out of our thinking. So what is it that I want you to know about that? Well, obviously, the easy things. The more you worry, the more you have to worry about. The more that you love, the more love do you see and experience in life. And again, much of that is happening not only because we're expressing out into life, but because we're receiving back the reflection of that, and it's filtering through us. So what we see is what we believe. I've been with people that actually could not see something happening because they didn't believe it was possible. Right in front of them, but they couldn't see it. And I think that wasn't an anomaly. I think we're doing that all the time. We're receiving stuff that we just don't get, or we don't care, or for some reason we don't believe, and it just doesn't register with our mind. So it might not as well have happened, or it may as well have been invisible. It really doesn't matter. All of this is absolutely true in our relationships with everyone in our life, is that if you think the problem is the other person, I want to assure you it is never the other person. It is always us. It's the way we experience that person and the way we express to that person. And the relationship is not this back and forth thing. It's your experience and your expression of that relationship is all about you. Now, you could say the same for the other person, and it's true. And the place to obviously come is a place where you can coexist without wanting to rip each other's hair out, or something nicer than that. But the whole idea of this, it comes from this idea of what's going on inside of us is where it's happening. And every time we point out to someone else or something else in our lives and want to blame that for being the problem, it really can't be. It just doesn't work that way. It appears, the illusion is that that's what's happening. But the truth is, no, not at all. That's not what's happening. What's happening is that we're controlling this entire scenario from within us. That's where it's happening, the whole thing. It looks like it's out there, but that's just a projection and a reflection back. The truth is that we are absolutely in charge of whatever is happening in our lives. And I also want to say, like I said for the last rule, this doesn't make anybody wrong. Because we're all entitled to live this life the way we choose to live it. We're all entitled to do what we want to do. Now, you, the people in this room today, and anyone that's watching us online, obviously is seeking some clarity around how life works and what's going on with me and how do I resolve these issues in my life. You're way ahead of the curve on this. So I kudos to everyone here that you have that interest, that you're doing that good work, because you're obviously paying attention. Most of the good people on this planet, the God beings, the light beings on this planet, are still living in a reactive state, thinking the problem's out there somewhere. And also thinking the answer's out there somewhere. It's not. It's inside of you. That's the place where you can make the change, the thing that you're trying to accomplish. So whatever you're putting out in thought and word and action is what's coming back to you. Shin had something to say about this as well. A person knowing the power of their word becomes very careful with his conversation. He only has to watch the reaction of his words to know that they do not come back. They do not return void. Isn't that true? You pay a compliment to someone, they're grateful, or they're thankful, or they return a compliment. Something equal usually comes back. And vice versa, if you're critical of someone, you're going to get criticized. It just works that way. Your word does not come back void. Never, ever. And not only that, and that's in a human interaction, but it's not limited to a human interaction, it's any interaction. With anything, with any situation or circumstance in your life, it's going to come back to you. And it does not come back void. It comes back with the same energy that you put it out with. The same kind of experience, yet you're on the other side. This might be a good time to talk about, no, I'm going to do that next. Here's the next one. Rule number 4, every life has challenges. And I'm sure if we did a show of hands, I'd say who has never had a challenge, nobody would raise their hand unless they are totally in an altered state and not getting it. Life has challenges. It's supposed to have challenges. We are not here to eat chocolates and sit in reclined repose day in and day out, thinking that life is just grand and glorious. Life is grand and glorious, but it also comes with challenges. Where do the challenges come from? They come from us. They often look like they're not coming from us. They look like a boss is doing it to us, or a spouse is doing it to us, or a neighbor is doing it to us, or someone in traffic is doing it to us. No, we are doing it to ourselves. All those are reflections of that. And one aspect of this is important to understand is karma. You've heard the term karma, right? Most people think that karma is punishment. It's not. Karma is this brilliant aspect of life that whatever you put out is going to come back. And the way I describe karma is that if we experience one side of a two-sided scenario where there's two clear perspectives, the karma is experiencing the other perspective that we didn't start with. It really, and let me give you one of my silly stories from Australia, where we were out scuba diving on the Great Barrier Reef, and when we were coming back in, I was standing next to a fellow that had a cap on, and his cap was fluttering in the wind. So a lot of you have heard this story. And I just thought I'd be a smart aleck, so I reached up, and I grabbed his hat and threw it behind my back and looked back in the water. And he turned around and he's looking in the water for his hat. And just as I pulled it out, I said, "I've got it." My hat flew off in the water. And isn't that exactly how life works? And it wasn't a punishment. I set that up. I set that up by teasing him, by popping his hat off. And of course, we had to stop and go back because that's what you do in those circumstances. And that's the way life works. And sometimes silly, but oftentimes we have this notion that things are a certain way and that's just the way it is. And then we get to experience the other side of that and say, maybe it's not always like that. Maybe there is choice. Maybe there are opportunities that I couldn't see. Maybe there are outcomes that I couldn't imagine. Whatever it is that I'm doing is going to create something that's going to broaden my perspective. And that makes me better. That makes me clearer. So I want those things to happen. I want karma in my life. If I take a stand against something, let me see what the other side of that looks like. That can only help. That can only help me in understanding how life works and what's going on. Challenges are not failures. Just because you're challenged does not mean that you've done something wrong. And the perfect example in this room is Barbara. Barbara is not at fault that she had a stroke. Granted, she created that. So did I. Because that's part of our path. And her recovery she is gaining all kinds of insights that she would never have had she stayed on the path she was on. She and I both knew that she had high blood pressure. She went through 4 or 5 different blood pressure medicines trying to manage that. She took the advice of doctors, but there were levels of relationships with doctors that worked and didn't work. There's no fault here. There's simply the path of life. So Barbara's recovery is still up to her. She does not have to gain 100% of the use of her body for this to be a valuable experience for her. This was a valuable experience for both of us, day one. And as I've said to you in this room many times, I have never loved this woman more. Our connection is stronger than it's ever been. So how can you say this is bad? I'm not saying you did, but some people would. How can we say something is wrong when somebody comes in this building in a wheelchair, or somebody finds out that they have cancer, or anything else? How could that be wrong? Now, am I suggesting that we want it? Those things, that we want these things to happen? Not consciously, but they are valid spiritual experiences for all of us. So whatever is going on in your life, put some time into finding peace with it and not seeing it as wrong, not seeing it as bad. It's not. It's simply your experience of life. What can you learn from it? What can you understand about yourself through that experience? And when you find it, now you've got the prize, no matter what the challenge may have been, no matter what. And the last rule, we are 100% responsible for our experience. Watch yourself if you ever catch yourself blaming anybody. I'm quick to do it. We've talked about that, about how I'm quick to say, somebody stole something. Yeah, right. Or whatever it is. No. We're creating it. And if we can create it, we can do something else. So there's no bad side or downside here. There's sides where you have to really look deeply. There's sides where you have to pay attention more than you were before, which takes us into strategies. And I better get going here. So we're going to go through these strategies pretty quick here. Strategy 1, pay attention. Now, I'm not saying pay attention so that you can prevent having struggles in your life or challenges. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is when you pay attention, you see what's happening. Where do you have to pay attention? To your thinking. What are you thinking? If you have the idea that you can have thoughts that aren't influencing your life, you're about to be a train wreck. Because everything you think reflects on your life. Everything. Hardships always come from within. No matter how much you can point to them on the outside, they come from within. Pay attention to what you're thinking. Pay attention to what you're doing. You know, I've had that conversation with me about Barbara's blood pressure. You know, why didn't I do this or that? Because that wasn't the path. But had I paid attention more in that moment, it could have been different, but this was the only path we could have been on. So right now, my job is to pay attention so that I can support her in her recovery, so that I can learn from her with what she's learning. and so that I can be with her every moment that I get to. And what a blessing that is. Pay attention. Let's see if there's any other thought about pay attention that I want to share. Focus on the game. Pay attention to the game that you're in, because the thoughts you're having are creating outcomes in your life. Don't do it out of fear that things could go wrong. Do it so that you can learn about yourself, so that you can be more the giant that Craig talks about in his book than the bodyguard who's trying to protect you. Don't play the bodyguard game. The idea in the book that he shares is that we have to surrender to the giant. And that's surrendering to our higher self. That's surrendering to a better way of being in the world, a more calm and collected way of being in the world. There have been great teachers with strokes. Ram Dass. And there have been others. There have been great teachers who had cancer. There have been great teachers who, well, you know what? All the great teachers of past ages have died. So that's kind of part of the deal. We're all going to do that. You can't hold that against anybody. Pay attention. Intend to win. This is a good one. This is the game of life is not a competition. We're not being competitive in the game of life. We are using the game of life to win. Now, you get to decide what your win is. And your win can look any way that you want, but I want to give you a hint. Every researcher that has ever worked with people when they were close to the end of their lives, the vast majority of them, if they had any regrets, they were not about things they didn't do. They were not about things that they did that they regretted. They were about things they didn't do. And the kinds of things that they were talking about is, I didn't tell my partner I loved him enough. I didn't say thank you enough. I wasn't generous enough. Those kinds of things are the things that people regret at the end of their lives. But the one thing that most people have in common at the end of their lives is that they're looking at who loved them and who they loved. And that may just be the win. If you can say that you had a lot of people that you love and that they loved you. That might be the idea of winning at this life. And the final strategy, don't take things personal. I'll give a shout out to Don Miguel Ruiz for this one. I knew when I first heard that was important. We spend too much time defending ourselves. We spend too much time blaming others for what's going on in our lives. And we all do it. We may do it quietly, we may do it secretly, but we still, I believe that everybody at some level takes life way too personal. And I invite you to revisit that, to think about that, about how you could live your life and not care what other people think of you, and not care what they say about you, and really believe in yourself, because you are the presence of the divine. You are the God that Craig Kolovo talks about. You are the one, and you're the one that needs to know that. Dr. Holmes, nope, there we go. We got another Florence Shinn quote. If you are centered, established in the right frame of mind, send out only goodwill to others. Without fear, you cannot be touched or influenced by the negative thoughts of others. Yeah. And I find myself, during this pandemic, doing it with people because I've been criticized a lot. And all I can do is love them. I don't know what else to do. So I love them. And I wish them well. And maybe someday they'll come back into the room. And maybe they won't. But I'll love them anyway. There is an old saying that man only dares use his words for three purposes: to heal, bless, or prosper. What man says of others will be said of him, and what he wishes for another, he is wishing for himself. Yay. Good advice. And Dr. Holmes's words: nothing is real unless you make it real. Nothing can touch us unless we let it touch us. Refuse to have your feelings hurt. Refuse to receive anyone's condemnation. In the independence of your own mentality, believe and feel that you are wonderful. This is not conceit, it is the truth. What can be more wonderful than the manifestation of infinite mind? I think Holmes was onto something. Yeah. So perhaps this thing called life is a game. And perhaps we can win it by keeping our hearts open, by remembering who we are, and about living full out, no matter what the circumstances are around us. And if that's the truth, we should all be doing pretty good today. And I wish you well, and I love you so much. Thank you.